Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, may the peace and blessings of Allah be with all of you. I pray that everyone's doing extremely well. Now, this is a short video explaining the process of Muraqabah, or in the English language, if we were going to translate that word, we might call Muraqabah meditative practice. This video is primarily aimed at those who are members of the Flourish coaching group or those who have purchased the Flourish journal and are looking to understand the process of Muraqabah, the process of meditation according to our tradition. Now, what is the translation really, or the meaning of the word Muraqabah in the Arabic language? Really, it comes down to this idea of being watchful or having a sense of watchfulness about one. Now, according to our teacher, Sheikh Ibrahim, there are two primary objectives of Muraqabah or of meditative practice. And the first of those is an attempt to silence inner dialogue. Well, what is inner dialogue? Inner dialogue is effectively the voice inside of your head, the commentary that you produce on the world around you. Your perception of the world, the way that you understand, the way that you interpret the universe around you is going to be determined by the nature of the inner dialogue inside of yourself. So when you see something that you like, you say, yes, ice cream. And you see something that you don't like and you say, oh, no, not that again. And something bad happens and you say that this is a disaster. And something good happens and you say, wow, this is fantastic. A certain level of that inner dialogue is natural, but part of the path is transforming, is changing, is amending the nature of that inner dialogue from a tone of resentment and frustration and annoyance to a tone of gratitude, thankfulness, and ultimately amazement. And this is what is meant when the masters of our path say that this path is built upon shukr, is built upon gratitude and thankfulness. So what we're attempting to do by means of the Muraqabah is to silence the chattering, the monkey chatter inside of the mind, the constant commentary, the talking, the judgments that we make upon the universe, and spend a little bit of time in silence. The extent to which that is possible varies depending upon the amount of time and practice that you put into this spiritual practice. And you must understand that it's not a simple thing. It's very difficult to do. So as soon as you begin to try, at the very least, to embark upon this path of Muraqabah, you're going to find inside of you all sorts of nafsi voices, all sorts of chatter, all sorts of preoccupations will suddenly rush to the forefront. So you'll sit down and all of a sudden you'll feel like you need to go and make the dinner or you need to go and wash the dishes. You didn't want to wash the dishes beforehand, but then when you sit down to make this Muraqabah, this urge will come over you because there will always be a pull away from inner serenity and inner peace. And as I've mentioned already, the second objective behind Muraqabah is the gradual transformation of one's inner dialogue. It's hoped that by means of silencing the inner dialogue, we can begin to change it from a tone of ingratitude, a tone of frustration, a tone of angst, a tone of resentment, into a more conducive tone of gratitude, of shukr, of thankfulness, and of amazement. You know, one of the terms that we use again and again in the litany of Sheikh Ibrahim is Subhanallah, which is a statement of bewilderment, a statement of amazement, looking around the world and being fascinated by what one sees. This is what we're trying to nurture. This is what we are trying to access by means of the Muraqabah. And everything that I've just said is kind of summed up in this statement from Sheikh Ibrahim himself, who said, deliberately pull yourself out of the minutiae of day-to-day events to see things from an increasingly higher perspective. Remember that the path is incremental. Remember that the path is granular. It takes a tremendous amount of time for us to begin to change what we see in the world around us. However, with the consistent, disciplined practice of Muraqabah, of meditative practice, then gradually, incrementally, we can begin to ascend and we can begin to see the world around us through a different prism. The voice inside of us, the kind of commentary that we're giving upon the universe will incrementally change. Initially, it may be quite judgmental. It may be quite frustrated. Well, if that person hadn't done this to me in the past, I could have been somebody X, Y, Z, etc., etc. But when we begin this practice and we hold on to it, then incrementally we can silence that dialogue, silence that voice, silence those judgments, and be more open to the experiences that Allah Almighty is sending to us. Remember that if we're judging the moment, if we're looking at the moment and saying this is bad, then how are we going to be able to experience the miraculous messages, the miraculous experiences that the Almighty is sending to us? It's an impossibility. So what we attempt to do by means of Muraqabah is to remove the blinkers that we place over our eyes and to begin to see the world as it truly is. And perhaps the greatest means of doing that is by inner silence, is by stillness internally, and that is nurtured, that is accessed by means of Muraqabah. So in the Islamic tradition, of course, the Muraqabah focuses around the divine name, the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the name of God. Now we must remember that there's a distinction between dhikr and muraqabah. Dhikr is a process of remembering Allah, and it is performed upon the tongue. So you might have seen or you might have participated in circles in which people say Allah, 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 Allah upon the tongue, enunciating that, or even in silence, Allah, 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 saying it to the self. This is a form of dhikr. This is a form of remembrance of Allah. This is distinct and different to muraqabah. Now, of course, muraqabah is a form of remembering Allah, but we're going to distinguish it from dhikr because it is not performed upon the tongue. It's not enunciating any words. Instead, muraqabah is silence. It's attempting to silence the inner dialogue and the voice inside of your mind. Therefore, Shaykh Ibrahim recommends that if you are going to perform the muraqabah, you find a place that is comfortable. Shaykh Ibrahim recommends that you sit on the floor cross-legged, but if that's impossible for you, or if it's not extremely comfortable, then you can be in any position. I have found in my own experience that it's better to kind of set this up as a formal process that you're going through, rather than doing it when you're lying on the bed or chilling on the sofa. Yeah, I think I'll do a bit of muraqabah. Not sure that that's the best way to do it. Instead, find a place, sit down. Shaykh Ibrahim says you can sit on a cushion. You could put a cushion against the wall if you like, in order to give yourself a little bit more comfort. You don't want to be in agony, but at the same time, you do want to ensure that you realize that you're doing something of eternal significance. This is a spiritual practice. This is an act of ibadah in Arabic, an act of worship, and therefore it must be afforded that kind of gravitas, that kind of significance. And it's also useful to be in a place which is as quiet as possible. If you've got noisy children running around and things like that, it's going to be very difficult for you to be able to perform an effective act of muraqabah, as it were. So maybe you have to wait until late at night. Maybe you have to try to find a place that is a little bit more quiet, a bit more peaceful, and then you can make the intention to begin your meditative practice. Now, Shaykh Ibrahim recommends that you begin the process of muraqabah by listening out for 3 sounds in the room around you. I know that I mentioned that it should be quiet, but you're never going to find somewhere that's silent, right? So therefore, you might have a dripping tap. You might have an air conditioning unit. You may have something in the background that you can rest your attention upon. Now, we're not listening for it. We're not listening for the conversation that's taking place in the street outside, or what kind of car is that that goes past me on the road. That's not what we're doing. Instead, we're resting our attention upon a particular sound to draw our attention away from the chatter, from the discussion, from the talk inside of ourselves, from the judgments that we make, and instead beginning to find that place of silence. By means of resting our attention upon a sound, we are beginning to silence the inner dialogue and begin this journey into the muraqabah. And once you have done that, once you've begun your induction, you might say, then we can begin with the method proper. As we said before, we're going to focus upon the name of Allah Almighty, but we're not going to articulate it upon the tongue. That makes it very difficult for me to demonstrate to you how to do it, because it's something that is done on the breath rather than on the tongue. So muraqabah is breathing, conscious breathing. As you breathe in, you're going to breathe in with the first syllable of the divine name, which is Al. And then at the top you would rest. And then as you breathe out, you will breathe the second syllable of the divine name, La. So in with Al and out with La. So in the process of breathing, you have stated the divine name, Allah. But remember that it's not like this, Allah, Allah, Allah. That's not what we're attempting to do. Instead, we're breathing in with the first syllable of the divine name, and we're breathing out with the second syllable of the divine name. Now, I will do it again with a little bit of sound just to indicate how it's done, and then we will practice doing it in silence, inshallah. So we would begin, and we would breathe in, and we would breathe out. But remember that we're not doing anything upon the tongue. So it is just breathing whilst watching, you might say, resting your attention on the divine name. Okay? And your breathing will obviously depend upon your lung capacity, right? Then some people are bigger than others, some people are smaller than others. So you don't want to become dizzy. You don't want to be going very quickly. You want to take it slowly and gradually and make sure that you're engaging in a peaceful activity. So breathing in with the first syllable of the divine name and breathing out with the second. Allah. But doing your best not to enunciate anything upon the tongue. Okay, how long should you do that for? Well, Sheikh Ibrahim recommends a minimum of 20 minutes and a maximum of 40 minutes. I think as a starter, as someone who's starting out on the path, you may well struggle. I certainly did, to be able to make muraqabah, to engage in meditative practice for that long. So if you've never done anything like this, you're going to realize quite quickly that your mind is like a wild horse, and it's going to start running off and trying to tell you about everything. Every little detail of the day that you've just had will come back and visit you during that period of time. And muraqabah is very challenging, it's very difficult, it's not simple, it's not easy. So therefore, don't start getting annoyed at yourself. Don't breathing, oh gosh, I'm meant to be in a peaceful condition here. It's hard, it's very difficult. Therefore, what? Therefore, be merciful upon yourself. And if you do drift off, I shouldn't even say if, when you drift off, when you begin to start thinking about what you're going to have for dinner or what time the meeting is tomorrow, when you begin to do that, what do you have to do? You have to be gentle with the self, and you just have to come back. Just come back to the divine name, rest your attention on Allah's name again, and begin the process. Therefore, if you're up for a challenge, you can begin with 20 minutes. If you find it a bit more challenging, then maybe set yourself something a little bit more manageable, maybe 5 minutes to begin with, and then incrementally increase it. Remember, one of the principles of the path is that we're seeking to strike equilibrium, we're seeking to strike balance. What does that mean? It means you can't set that which is too difficult for you, but you also can't set something which is super simple and easy. You know yourself, and you have ikhlas, you have sincerity, which means that you must select the amount of time which you are finding beneficial. As I said, our teacher, Sheikh Ibrahim, has said minimum 20 minutes. Okay, in one sitting. So that's the instruction of the Sheikh. If you struggle with those things, then maybe you can reduce it a little bit, and Allah knows best. Thank you for listening. I hope that that's useful. If there are any questions, you can put them in the comments underneath this video, or you can contact us via social media so that we can try and give you a hand with that. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم.